option of the table, including force. Those are the words coming from President Bola Tinubu after the second Ecowas extraordinary summit held in Abuja today over the Niger coup situation. Is there any pressure on the President Bola Tinubu on the situation in the country as he grapples also with the continental issues? We'll be analyzing some of the issues that have cropped up over the last 70 days or more since President Bola Tinubu assumed office. Hello everyone, welcome to the program. This is Politics Today live on China's television. I'm Sean Akimaloye in Abuja. We're monitoring for you the situation in Niger, and those of you who will be asking, what's our business with Niger? There's a whole lot of business. There are a lot of those Kanuri, Hausa, Fufude speaking Nigerians who have links in Nigeria, and they say what affect one, affect all. You remember what happened in the northeastern region of the country, the situation in Libya, the situation around the French-speaking areas of around Nigeria and the neighboring countries, and how that has fueled the situation in Maiduguri, in Borno State, in Adamawa, and also in Yobe State. That's in Boko Haram thrive over the last few years. There are those who will also tell you that what we're seeing in the northwest region of the country is also a brainchild of what is happening within the continent of Africa. There is a rise in toppling of democratic government on the continent. How does it affect Nigeria? The president of Nigeria, Bola Tinubu, is a leader of Ecowas. He's taking charge and making decisions. But those who are warning the president on the decision that Ecowas and his leadership will be making in that regard tonight. We'll be looking and dissecting the issues, what the president should do and must not do not to get Nigeria into further trouble. We're dissecting all of these for you. So sit tight, everyone, because we'll be bringing you all the perspectives, all the details that you need to know, the timeline, the issues, the options on the table, security under President Tinubu's watch, economy under President Tinubu's watch. What has he done wrong? What has he done right? We'll be analyzing all of that for you tonight. Stick around with me. First and foremost, let's check out some of your political roundup stories, and I'll bring to you the details of what has happened today.
The House of Representatives has ordered the arrest of a former desk officer in charge of the Integrated Payroll and Personnel Information System, IPPIS, at the Federal Character Commission, FCC, Haruna Kodo, over job racketeering allegations. The chairman of the ad hoc committee investigating mismanagement of personnel recruitment, employment racketeering, and other related matters, Honorable Yusuf Gagdi, made the pronouncement during a meeting today in Abuja. The ad hoc committee had earlier summoned Kolo to appear before the panel over a series of allegations laid against him, but he failed to yield the call. Also, the committee has given a deadline of Monday, August the 14th, 2023, for the Assets Management Company of Nigeria, AMCON, and other agencies who have disobeyed the call to appear before the committee. The Federal High Court sitting in Lagos has adjourned till Tuesday, August the 15th, for further hearing in the applications filed by the suspended Central Bank of Nigeria Governor, Godwin Emefiele, seeking to stop the federal government from further remanding or prosecuting him on the charge of illegal possession of firearms and ammunitions, or on any other charge for that matter. Justice Nicholas Owibo ruled that the application, which touched on the jurisdiction of the court, was priority and will be taken alongside another application filed by the government seeking leave to appeal against the order granting bail to the suspended CBN governor. Justice Ahmed Mohammed of the Federal High Court in Abuja has reiterated his earlier order that status quo be maintained in the alleged impeachment of the Deputy Governor of Edo State, Philip Shuaibu, by the Governor, Godwin Obaseki, over their differences. Justice Mohammed gave the order following the inability of the State Security Service, SSS, to file an application showing cause why the main suit should not be entertained. Other defendants told the judge that they were ready, having filed their processes. But the counsel for the SSS told the court that he was yet to file the application requested by the court, as they ought not to be brought into the matter in the first place. Justice Mohammed, however, adjourned the matter to August 22nd, urging the SSS counsel to file his process within 24 hours, while noting that the IGP is very aware of the matter in court. The National and State House of Assembly Elections Petition Tribunal in Kano has nullified the election of a member of the House of Representatives representing Tarauni Federal Constituency, Mr. Mukhtar Yerima, on the new Nigeria People's Party platform. The three-man panel of judges led by Justice I.P. Chima ruled that Yerima's victory was invalid due to the forgery of his primary school certificate submitted to the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC). Justice Chima, while delivering the tribunal's decision, noted that after a thorough examination of the evidence presented before the court, it was noted that Mr. Yerima submitted a forged primary school certificate to INEC, which disqualifies him from holding elective position. The tribunal also directed the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) to retract the certificate of return that was previously issued to him with immediate effect. A civil society organization under the aegis of Unified Nigerian Youth is asking the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission (EFCC) to investigate the Labour Party governorship candidate in Imo State, Chief Athan Ochonu, and his company over alleged 57 billion naira fraud. Addressing a news conference in Kaduna State, the publicity secretary of the group, Mr. Ali Mohammed, alleged that Senator Ochonu and his company, Mathan Nigeria Limited, had in 2006 diverted the sum of 57 billion naira on the pretense that it was going to construct 774 comprehensive primary school centers across the 774 local government areas in the country, without executing the contract till date. The group therefore calls on the EFCC and other security agencies to investigate the Labour Party governorship candidate. Amnesty International are calling on the federal government to prioritize issues concerning young people because of the critical role they play in the society. The country director of the organization, Mr. Issa Sanusi, stated this at the commemoration of International Youth Day in Abuja. Mr. Sanusi adds that youth must be involved in part of the decision-making exercise for the country's development.
Thank you so much, everyone. Let's tell you what happened today in the Southeast region, where the governors of the region met today with some service chiefs and deliberating on the security situation in the region. The meeting had traditional rulers, key stakeholders, and some of the service chiefs. They are considering all the options that will help a proper administration of security and peace in the region. This is part of the deliberation and the outcome of the meeting of the 5 states of the Southeast today.
The forum firmly resolved to fight insecurity decisively, individually and collectively, in partnership with the federal government of Nigeria and other stakeholders. We commend the security agencies for their cooperation and achievements thus far, and encourage them not to relent. We wish to categorically state that the perpetrators of the insecurity and their sponsors in our region are criminals and should not be seen as legitimate agitators. Therefore, upon arrest, they should be dealt with in accordance with the laws of the land.
All right, then, let's tell you what happened today in Abuja, the nation's capital, where there is another extraordinary summit of the Ecowas leaders today, where President Bola Tinubu is saying no option is now off the table, including the use of force. The president said this at the second extraordinary meeting. The second that probably will be happening within 10 days. The president in his speech says that from the communique and the agreement made at the meeting, no option is taken off the table. And he says that leaders of the region are steadfast in their commitment to supporting Niger towards peaceful and democratic stability in the country. The president believes that while there will be challenges ahead, but with collective resolve, ECOWAS will navigate all obstacles for lasting peace and prosperity in Niger Republic and other member countries. Take a listen to President Tinubu.
In reaffirming our relentless commitment to democracy, human rights, and the well-being of the people of Niger, it is crucial that we prioritize diplomatic negotiations and dialogue as the bedrock of our approach. We did. And we still look to engage the party involved, including the coup leaders, in honest discussion to convince them to relinquish power as suggested and reinstate President Bazoum. It is our duty to exhaust all avenues of engagement to ensure a swift return to constitutional governance in Niger.
Since the toppling of the democratically elected government in Niger, which is just a neighbor to Nigeria, the military junta in that country has since been firm on their decision to hold onto power. In fact, today they set up a new government, putting up a team together, and there's an expiration of the ultimatum that have been issued by Ecowas. But all the options that have been put, both diplomatic and mediation processes, seem not to have worked out or successful. But this is the position of ECOWAS leaders and all the 15 member countries who have met over the last few days. But today, this was the outcome, and they say military option of use of force is not off the table. Take a listen to the president of the commission.
Call on all partner countries and institutions, including the United Nations, to support ECOWAS in its effort to ensure a quick restoration of constitutional order in conformity with its normative instruments. Direct the President of the Commission to monitor the implementation of the sanctions. Direct the Committee of the Chief of Defense Staff to activate the ECOWAS standby force with all its elements immediately. Order the deployment of the ECOWAS standby force to restore constitutional order in the Republic of Niger. Underscore its continued commitment to the restoration of constitutional order through peaceful means.
Those are the decisions. What does it mean to have the standby force to restore order? What are the implications of the statement of the president? But let's take a look at this information, everyone. These are the options that are available. Experts will tell you. Diplomatic or diplomacy is on the table. Political options are on the table in this kind of scenario. Economic sanctions are on the table. There is a possibility of counter-coup or opposition even within the military rank and file in Niger Republic. There is a military and the use of force, which is one of the options, and it's now on the standby. They were nearing a situation where there will be a movement in that direction of a use of force. Political intervention and mediation that are on the table. The military junta, the ousted democratically led president in the center of this, ECOWAS, President Tinubu, at the center of all of these. But in a moment, I will show you the timeline. Where did these all begin? Just in the last few days, less than 3 weeks or so, things are escalating so fast. Why are northern leaders in the country warning? Why are experts telling President Tinubu to be cautious about the way and manner it handled it? Will these escalate so much that it can affect Nigeria's political and security situation? Let's get one man talking who has been speaking about it, who has written widely about it. It's Professor Usuji Medana. He's a professor of penology and international security. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining us tonight on the program.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. You've written, I read your article in your piece today. Yeah. It was much of caution. It was much of giving advisory to the president and the ECOWAS leadership about this. But the first question is, for those of us, we don't want to bother ourselves about the international dimension or the technicalities of all these. Niger, as we know it, we have at least 3 languages that are spoken in Niger Republic and are spoken also in Nigeria. Niger is one of the largest countries on the continent, in fact, the second largest, with over 1 million square kilometers. that we have, most of it having desert. There's just about 25 million people in that country. If there is a war in Niger, what is Nigeria's business?
Sheung, thank you for having me. Let's do the anatomy of coup in African country. If you look at it from 1960 to almost to date, we have almost more than 140 attempted coup, and 80 were successful. So you look at what were the reasons and what happened, and why these coups were somehow succeeding in doing what they are doing. Up to now, we have not come out from the colonial hangover and the military junta hangover to look at our security architecture, to look at how are we going to reposition a democratic government in terms of VIP protections, and so on and so forth. If you look at Niger in particular, why you mentioned in your prelude, why you see most of the northerners we are talking about it. We don't have a defined border. Most of the things you see on the map, they are not very kind of feasible. If you get to places, you see how we overlap within ourselves. Some places actually looks like Nigeria, but it's Niger. Some places look like Niger, but it is Nigeria.
And I understand that there's a lot of intermarriages with Nigerians, northern Nigerian, and there are
even today, someone read my article, and the responses there, one of the person, he married from Katsina. He married, I think, last week. He's part of the transition committee. He's a Nigerian. You look at the relationship. Apart from that, if you have a country, maybe a border with a country that span 1,500 kilometers, that is from Maiduguri to Kebbi states, and you have to be very careful on what you are trying to do. And first thing that Nigeria ought to do in the first place, we should exhaust our bilateral engagement before the multilateral engagement. You have seen the Khalifa, the Sanusi Lami, the Sanusi, was in Niger. So that engagement should continue, whether other options are being considered. Now, come to another issue. Nigeria would not joke with its own interests.
What is Nigeria's interest?
Nigeria's interest is their bilateral agreement, bilateral relationship, what is going to happen to Nigeria. If you look at the countries that surrounded Niger, one, there is Mali, there is Chad, and there is Burkina Faso. All these things, you have coups. Even the Malian and the Chadian guy, if you look at the constitution of the country, in the absence of the president, the speaker shall sit. But he was from the army that now become the president of Mali. Definitely, Chad rather. So definitely, and he was the first person to speak with the coupists.
Sorry, just for a moment. Look at the map there.
Yes.
All right. So if you see, Nigeria has more than 4 states that borders Niger.
Exactly.
You look at Sokoto,
yes.
Katsina,
Kano, Yobe,
yes,
and
Jigawa,
yes,
and of course as a part of
Maiduguri,
Yobe,
yes, to Borno State.
Borno State,
yes.
So we have. So the implication is that any unrest or violence in that country will spill over into Nigeria.
And you should know, most of our IDPs, as a result of Boko Haram, they are in Niger, and you have some as a result of the banditry, they are in Niger. You have the multinational distinct joint force, the multilateral joint force. Our military, they are together with the Niger military in that operation. So I think Nigeria should always consider the bilateral engagement, that is diplomacy. If you look at it, Sean, the 2000 Lomé Declaration, if you now come to 2007 too, the AGA of 2014, that is African governance architecture, only 17 countries signed it. And out of the 17 countries, only 6 ratified that very agreement. The domestication is just an ink, this thing we are giving to it. This military always use this as a yardstick to strike. Suggestion here, even in Nigeria, we have to restructure our VIP protection. How? We need to have more of our DSS, the police, the NIA, within anything villa. The military left brigade of guard for us. If you look at the police, they have ear wing. All what they need is to strengthen that institutions. The military actually underdeveloped these police.
So
they have 7,000. Let me just.
So just a moment.
Yeah.
So that people will get the perspective you are bringing.
Yes.
So for Nigeria,
yeah,
and our security architecture and the protection of our democratic values,
yes,
and tendencies, we need to rethink our security apparatus. That is what you're saying.
Yes.
So that we can ward off any possible coup. Is that right?
Yes. If you look at it, we have more than 7,000 formation of the police. That means if there is any movement of coup, if you strengthen that institution, the police will be able to dictate what is happening there. The military, because of successive coup in Nigeria, they underdeveloped the police. If you go to Kachia, you see most of the equipment of these police guys, they are just lying hollow there. So if you do this, you look at the counterterrorism office in the NSA's counterterrorism department in the NSA's office too. You look at all this and strengthen the institutions. You don't need to have all this. If you look at it, most of the people that did coup in Africa, they were either close to the president or protecting the president, elected president. If you continue doing this, you will be having this kind of problem. So we have to look at that. Then, issue of good governance matters. The moment these people took the president into hostage, that was the right time for us to engage in bilateral discussion.
So you look at the reasons, because you highlighted that in your article, and you were asking the questions. The military did not just take over for no reason.
Yes.
And almost all the coup in Nigeria from 1966 further down in Africa. But I mean, we domesticate the matter now to look at the reasons why there is a military takeover. Burkina Faso has had one of the highest military coups and one of the most successful. We've seen in Chad, we've seen in some other part of Africa, and this has been on the rise. One of the things that you highlighted in your article is the fact that corruption, mismanagement of resources, and you will hear the military junta in Niger saying that, and in fact in Burkina Faso say they have a lot of resources that the colonialists have used against their own country, but now they need to start thinking internally. Corruption, mismanagement of wealth, and the high-handedness of political class. That is one of the, those are the reasons why these military guys are coming on board. Is there a warning to our political class?
This is the issue I mentioned, the African Charter 2014, that is the issue of African governance architecture, which has to do with the issue of local governance, domesticating the local governance here. We've been fighting on the issue of local government autonomy, where people can be close to the government. We've been fighting, we've been battling. There were a series of amendments of our constitution so that this tier of government can have total freedom. They can have their money coming to them directly, their funds. So if you look at it, the issue of corruption is there. The issue of transparency in governance, you must have those elements, those thematic areas to address them. That is that. Then issue of communication. Today, if you look at the sentiment going on, mostly in the northern part of the country, people does not know that the president is acting as the chairman of the Ecowas, not as a single individual. It was an Ecowas decision who he happens to be the president. So you need to communicate to tell the people this is the engagement by Ecowas. Then what Nigeria is doing is to go and explain to people. But we concentrated in speaking in English language, to be telling people every day what we are doing, where the bulk of the people does not understand this language we are speaking.
The dynamics to this, or the intrigue in this, is that as much as the rest of the world is speaking against the coupists and the junta in Niger, it does look like there is a popular support for the military junta on the ground in Niamey. And the street, on most of the days, they are supporting the coupists.
But you look at it, the psychological warfare too works to some extent. because now it's a transition committee to that transition cabinet. The junta is trying to say, no, we are not here to sit. We are here to hand over power to civilians. Now, this is where the bilateral engagement will be involved. Yesterday, we have seen the Khalifa, Sanusi Lamida Sanusi. He was there. We need to have more of this engagement. Let me tell you, most of these military officers of Niger, they attend their staff and command college courses in Nigeria. So that means there are a lot of instructors that knows these people one-on-one. Now, if you go to the multilateral joint force where Nigeria is leading, you have some people that are together with these Nigerian military guys. Then we have to now engage more in diplomacy to try to see how we are going to solve the problem. If you have, let me tell you one good thing. The Boko Haram, they have not settled in Niger. They did not allow them to settle there, to abort them. The same thing with the bandits. What if we engage into that and we are facing an internal security issue here? And you should know, Niger is our buffer with Libya, where you have a lot of weapons coming from that angle. If you Google and see the small weapons in Africa going around in West Africa, there are 70% found in Nigeria. From where? Mostly from Libya. So we have to be careful in handling this issue. No. It's like America. If you go to USA, USA will not joke with Mexico or Cuba. They'll have to look at their national interest, national security interest, before they look at regional interest.
Isn't it,
so the same thing that we should
a regional issue that's caused a problem with Russia and Ukraine?
Exactly.
Now, the question now here is, there is now an announcement by ECOWAS that the ECOWAS standby force should be on guard and should be standing by. What does that mean? Isn't that a military or use of force that is being considered imminently?
Definitely, there must be a psychological warfare. ECOWAS will not just sit down and say, oh, we are not taking any action.
What is the standby force?
The chairman...
Can you explain to Nigerians what this standby force means?
Definitely, they have to look at it. Where is it escalating to? You have 4 countries now in the ECOWAS region with military heads. And if care is not taken, it will split or escalate to another country. So ECOWAS force must be on standby, and it's a psychological warfare to the coupists in Niger and other places that are maybe there is an intention to do that. And you should know, right now, in the Francophone countries, if you look at it, there is a serious rebellion against the French interests. So we have to look at that. That's why I keep on emphasizing that we have to look at the Nigerian national security interest first before the regional interest.
So it means, Prof, that with the announcement and all the pronouncement of ECOWAS today, that the ECOWAS standby force should be prepared to restore order and democratic governance in Niger. It means that boots on the ground, military boots, including soldiers from Nigeria, might be moving into Niger. Is that the case?
No, I think from the president's speech, which we have watched here, that they are looking at all options. And that option, actually, the military option will be the last resort. And I don't think we are going to go into that military options.
If it gets to that, what is the implication?
The implication, actually, you know, when you start a war, you don't know what will happen again. And we said it, these very fragile borderlines, there is going to be serious distance, and it might even get to the southwest, because you have the Benin Republic too, by the other side of the Niger. So there is a lot of things there involved, and we have to think more than 1 million times in a second. We have to think seriously.
We're already bombarded internally with our struggles to hold our territory. Yeah. Not even in terms of military now, in terms of civil security hold on our territory. Now the threat on our the external integrity of our nation is going to be called to question with this. On a final note, Prof, give us an understanding of, if you were in President Tinubu's shoes, a new president who is trying to find his feet on the ground. Now he's faced to be with this kind of situation in Niger, now leading ECOWAS with the fact that they want to warn any possible military tendencies. If you look at it, since 2021, Prof, they're having very high number of coup attempts in the region.
Yes.
Chad, Mali, Guinea, Sudan, Niger. In 2022 alone, there were 5 attempts, but only 2 in Burkina Faso succeeded.
Yes.
If you look at since 1952, Nigeria had 8 coup attempts, 8 in Niger, 8 in Benin Republic, 8 in Mali, 10 in Ghana, 10 in Sierra Leone, 9 in Guinea-Bissau, 10 in Burkina Faso, 17 in Sudan, 11 in Burundi, 9 in Comoros. The problem here is, if you were in President Bola Tinubu's shoes, would you focus more on internal issues, or you be more involved in what is happening across the continent?
From my first statement, I look at it, I said that we have to look at national security interests before the regional security interests. What is our own interest in Niger and in our border countries? We have to look at that very seriously because it's a buffer.
What do you think is more?
Then the next thing
what do you think
is consultation. More? The national security interest is more. Then we have to consult and do counter-consultation. There are a lot of experts within the country that are going to advise the president on what to do in this matter. So they have to be engaged, they have to be consulted, they have to be involved. If you look at what the Sanusi has done, he went there on his own. And I think there should be more engagement, more people to go into that, to sing to these coupies. What would be the repercussion? And even if you want to do any kind of sanction, you sanction those involved and those that are with the coupies, then you now targeted them.
There are those who say if African leaders do not take charge of the cause, that those who are of the school of thought and those who believe that the West sometimes have their own agenda and they decimated some part of the continent, and we should not allow the West to intervene and the colonial mentality to prevail in this tendency. But how African leaders are going to deal with this one is left. Libya is a big lesson.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Professor Usuji Medana, Professor of Penology. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
We take a break, everyone. And when we return, more on what is on the hands of President Tinubu. Too much to chew. It's a hot potato on his hand. How does he handle it? We'll be getting more perspectives on this one. Remember what happened in the southeast region of the country. Leaders in that region are also thinking on how they can manage the violence that is escalating in the Igbo land. We're discussing more on internal issues in Nigeria after this break. Join us again. So much everyone for staying with us. More information as to what is happening in the country and more worries about how Nigeria needs to navigate a very difficult situation. Nigeria is a big leader. How it plays within these region and this situation is a whole lot of things worrying a few people. I've come across an information, a communication from very eminent Nigerians, an open letter that has been written to President Bola Tinubu. And look at the caliber of people that have written these letters. The likes of Professor Jibrin Ibrahim, the likes of General Agua, Professor Jega, Professor Kuna, Dr. Kole Shetima, Dr. Abdul, Malam Kabiru Yusuf, Miriam Weiss, Kabiru Adamu, Dr. Usman Bugaje, Dr. Yaya Ashib. These are the kind of Nigerians, and some of those who are even involved in the intent of this letter. Names may not be public, but I tell you, they are eminent Nigerians, high-profile Nigerians that are worried and concerned and also sharing their views with President Bola Tinubu. One of the members or the signatories to the open letter, Dr. Kabiru Adamu, he joins us live here in our studio. Thanks so much, Doc, for joining us tonight.
Thank you for
And I read this letter, and for me, I feel for a moment as though the letter was addressed to me. The letter was titled "The Niger Coup d'etat Aligning Ecowas and National Interests." In this letter written to President Tinubu, I hope that he is in receipt of this letter. But what comes to mind, these eminent Nigerians have come together, but if you look at it, most of them are northerners, including yourself. What was the intent of this letter?
First and foremost, to de-escalate the situation. We felt that the situation was at a point where a few things could happen. Number one is ego. If you make a position and then the other side calls your bluff, then at that point, there is a concern that so many things could happen. And so how do we de-escalate the situation? All private citizens, no government official involved. We also recognize that diplomacy is pursued along several lines. There is the official channel, and then what is called tranche A, and then the tranche B diplomacy, where private individuals who have access that government sometimes does not have. And so using that access could provide avenues for conversations. Most times, diplomacy is reliant on intelligence. And where intelligence is effective, then backdoor channels are opened. And in this instance, someone of the caliber, as an example, of former Emir of Kano, Sanusi Lamido, or certain business persons who have strong business relationships in Niger, could open channels that government officials cannot open. And so, as an example, when Sanusi Lamido visited, you saw he was able to achieve what, frankly, even the US diplomats could not achieve. So this was what was in our mind: provide, de-escalate the situation, provide an option for conversations, so that the situation does not lead to unintended consequences.
It looks like Ecowas has declared war on Niger. Does that look so?
No, not at all. What Ecowas did is to activate the standby force and then order the standby force. But at the same time, the president reiterated his preference for dialogue. Ordering a raid or a war on Niger would require a lot. Some are even arguing it may require the involvement of the UN due to certain charters between member states. So I don't think we've reached that stage. Yes, a declaration has been made. It is an increase in the tempo of sanctions that have already been, but I don't think we've reached that stage where a declaration of war.
One of the worries of the signatories to this letter, and in that letter, it said Nigeria has a serious humanitarian crisis with millions of internally displaced persons and hundreds of thousands of refugees, including in Niger. It is important to prevent the worsening of the humanitarian crisis. How large scale could these be?
There are at the moment, I think, 7 Nigerian states that are bordering Niger. We do have at the moment, I think about, I'm not sure of the exact number, but there are Nigerian refugees that are currently in Niger, from Sokoto, from Borno, and from several other states as a result of the conflict that are existing in that state. Now, even with the power supply that we've cut to Niger, a humanitarian situation is emerging in Niger. Their hospitals are not able to function the way they want to. Supply of water is affected and all of that. So a humanitarian situation is emerging. And you have to remember that there are about 25 million persons in Niger. Now let's assume that 10% of that 25 million, which is 2.5 million, have to now move into the 7 neighboring states in the north. I do not think, and I'm sure you will agree with me, that the 7 northern states have the capacity to accommodate these 2.5 million. Even if they do, given our current economic circumstances, the consequences would be one that would have a toll on their ability to meet the development aspirations of their people.
And one of the worries is also that there is a possibility of resurgence of Boko Haram insurgency, farmer-headed conflict, banditry, mass kidnapping might be exacerbated. The flow of arms might be, we might see the rise in that. Violent extremism, armed banditry could spread and deepen in our sub-region. What statistics, what data do we have to support that this is a possible tendency?
First off, you need to look at the age-old gun-running channels that exist in the Sahel, most of which are cut across Niger. Niger's landmass is bigger than Nigeria, actually. And
so it's the second largest country on the continent.
In the continent. And given its population, about 25 million, and its capacity, the capacity of the state to man that border, now the weaker the state becomes, the more gaps are created. Now, time will not allow me to go into the details, but I'll mention a few things. The U.S., once the U.S. recognizes that there is a coup in Niger, it may have to restructure or realign its current engagement with Niger, including the closure of some of its military bases. The same thing with Germany, the same thing with France. Now,
how many military bases does the U.S. have?
Two. One drone base, and then the other one for its troops.
And one is in the MA.
And the other one, I think, somewhere in the border. I can't remember the exact.
Yeah, because I understand that at a time where there was an operation by one a military elite group in northeastern region of the country, that also was coordinated from the MA, what I understand. And so in that sense, the United States is deeply involved, and perhaps the reason why we saw the leaders in the United States speaking to President Tinubu in this respect. Am I right?
There are strategic reasons for the presence of those bases in Niger, some of which are directly related to Niger, others are beyond Niger. A good example, Libya. The eyes and ears that the U.S. needs to monitor development, not just in Libya, but across the Sahel. Point I'm trying to make is if those bases are closed, gaps are created, intelligence gaps that now allow these bad elements to continue to grow and then establish themselves. The biggest country in the region is Nigeria. That's where their interest and intention is. And let's not even go too far. Islamic State in West Africa province, what is it trying to achieve? The Jamaat al-Ahl al-Sunnah lil-Dawati wal-Jihad, what are they trying to achieve? Carve out a part of that territory and create their own state. Now, the global effort, the regional effort to counter terrorism, a lot of it, the focus of that is in Niger. Let's not forget that Niger is also a member of two of the regional efforts to counter terrorism, the G5 initiative and then the multinational joint task force. With this coup, the cessation of the membership of Niger in these two regional efforts is highly likely. Because, of course, after the coup in Mali, Mali's membership of the G5 was suspended. So once this suspension happens, it means the contribution of Niger to these two initiatives would probably be suspended. And that means our capacity as a region to address terrorism would be severed significantly. That effort is likely to come back to Nigeria with all our various conflicts that are ongoing. So I think we need to start looking at this from that angle. To answer your question directly, gaps will be created. Terrorist groups would have more opportunity, as it were, to target Nigeria and to carry out some of the activities that they are carrying and, of course, increase them in Nigeria.
Let's take a look at a few information that Dr. Kabir Adamu might help us expatiate on. And that, first and foremost, information about Niger Republic. For a lot of people who do not know, I've mentioned a few times about the language similarities and the language tendency that you might find a lot of, just like in Dahomey and in some part of your state, you find a lot of similarities in culture and language with the Nigerian people in Benin Republic. You find that happening, just like you go to Lagos and in neighboring state, you find the Badagry are people of Lagos state and their neighbors. You find those cultural tendencies are mingling the same way. The Sokoto, the Katsina, the Bruno, the Jigawa, the Yobe, the Adamawa, in the neighbors, in the fringes of the country, neighbors with Niger, you have a lot of relationships there. So let's take a look at it. In terms of landmass, Niger Republic is massive, the second largest in terms of landmass on the continent. They just have about 25 million. It's just about Lagos and maybe Ogun State put together. If you look at it also, the most part of Niger is of that landmass of over 1 million square kilometers of desert areas. But again, what has happened over the last few years is the fact that, a few days rather, the timeline, let's take a look at the timeline of what has happened in recent times. So from the 26th day of July, these are some of the activities. The military junta detained, toppled President Muhammadu Bazoum's government, a democratically elected government in that country, and we find that the head of that junta who declared himself, and they detained that president, held him hostage. From that moment, ECOWAS, led by President Tinubu, issued a 7-day ultimatum. And what has happened over that time is that the neighbors, Mali and Burkina Faso, they've shown solidarity. Don't forget, in Burkina Faso is also a military junta controlling that country. And of course, they have also shown support, and there's a threat against any military intervention. If you flip the page, you see what has happened over the last few days. Nigeria and ECOWAS delegation, you see Sultan of Sokoto, former head of state, they've gone to that country, met with the head of the military junta, and the meeting was deadlocked. Nigeria has shut its border, cut power, and the president had also approached the parliament, the Nigerian Senate, to ask for some kind of intervention. They warned the president not to put boots on the ground in that country. Now, what has happened is that there is an expiration of that ultimatum to that country. But the military, there was a meeting of the Chief of Staff Committee on that on Niger. But again, at the end of the day, it looks like the military guys in Niger are holding their own. There is a standoff right now leading up to the meeting of today, where they have issued the fact that there will be an open door to consultation and meeting and diplomatic talks. But again, a standby force will be deployed if necessary to restore peace. This is what has happened. These are some of the information, Doc. What sense can you make out of it?
Just to add to that information, today, calling the bluff of the ECOWAS, the military junta named its cabinet.
Absolutely.
On the same day that the ECOWAS is meeting. So clearly telling ECOWAS that they are not ready to negotiate, to discuss. And I think that is why the stand by ECOWAS needs to be supported by every law-abiding and patriotic Nigerian. We are united, and I hope so, in the fact that the only way we'll accept a change of government is through the ballot box. Anyone who attempts anything outside of that, I think the owners and we need to agree as a whole that we should reject that. Now, having said that, how do we go about doing that? And I think that's the discussion, argument here. Should we have mentioned military intervention? Is it the mentioning of military intervention that is now creating this difficult situation that we're in? How do we move ahead to allow for some form of discussions that would lead to where we are? One thing that is important, and I'm happy to note in your timeline that you've emphasized that point. Niger and Nigeria share more than just the normal relationship. There is a strategic relationship between the two countries. Given the landmass that Niger has, if that landmass becomes an avenue of vulnerabilities to affect Nigeria, then age-long historical relationships would have been completely destroyed.
Is this a fear of the leaders in the north?
Partly, it is.
Beyond that, are there other issues that most Nigerians may not be privy to?
Consequences. You can win a particular battle, but lose the war. We can topple the junta, but what would follow that consequence? Just to give you an example, our power supply, which is, well, I think about 30%, if I'm right, dependent on hydro, and of course on River Niger. We have an age-old agreement with Niger to supply them power based on certain treaties that we've signed with them. We've unilaterally cut that.
The Nigerian authority is saying they are owing us billions.
That's a different thing. If we raise...
As a reason for the sanctions.
If we raise that and use it as a reason to cut, that's a different thing. But here we're using... Someone willingly took his vulnerability and handed over to you because he trusts you as a brother. And then at his weakest point, you use that vulnerability. After the war, what will Niger do? So those are the consequences that we need to think about. If before now they trusted us, what will they still trust us after this issue? Because one day we'll be behind this, either through this what is going on right now, or eventually they'll hand over.
So there are those also who are putting ethnic tendency into this matter, and I've heard this argument. and I don't know where this sits with you. You are also a leader and a force within the northern region of the country and in the country as a voice in your own area. And those who believe that President Bola Tinubu is of the southern Nigeria, and the fact that the north and Niger have a lot of things in common. A war on Niger, they see it as a war against them. And the fact that the president moved militarily against Niger is moving against the northern region of the country. Is there any truth in that?
You're right. There is a narrative going around. And the first time I heard it, I've never in my adult life believed that the issue of social cohesion was a challenge in Nigeria as at this moment. I found those allegations ridiculous. I found them quite alarming. And I'm completely worried that as a nation, we're not addressing the root causes that allow this type of narratives to emerge, including in places where, frankly, you would never expect them to emerge. Point I'm making is there is that narrative out there. Is it the right narrative? No. Why is that narrative there? Because we're not using strategic communication to portray our position and then to get the buy-in of the people. The APC administration, the Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration, mentioned in its manifesto, the Renewed Hope manifesto, that it intends to win the hearts and minds of Nigerians. I'm waiting for a strategic communication mechanism that it would release to tell us how it intends to go about winning the hearts and minds of people. A position came out that was Ecowas position. The average Nigerian, especially the people who are pushing this narrative regarding ethnicity and perhaps even religion to an extent in certain areas, perhaps are not even aware of the fact that this is an Ecowas position and not necessarily a Nigerian position. How do we address that? Strategic communication.
We need to go now, but in 30 seconds, if you may, Dr. Adamu, I'd like to ask you, Nigeria is like a Russia, Germany, France in West. Nigeria is like a United States in part of the Americas. We need a strong leader in Nigeria that can be the face of Africa. How much of strength can Bola Tinubu show to give that strength to the continent of Africa?
I think he's showing that. He's been resolute in his position. What I would love to see to support that is the mechanism of governance around him. That would include, for instance, him naming his cabinet, making sure that that cabinet goes around mobilizing. He mentioned when he visited Jaji that he will harness our national powers. So I'm waiting to see a cabinet that would recognize that power, especially national power, is at the center of all of this. How do we harness that national power to achieve our national interests? I think it's as simple as that.
Dr. Kabiru Adamu is the MD of Beacon Consulting Limited, a security outfit here in Abuja, Nigeria, and a security consultant. Thank you so much for these perspectives that we shared tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Well, that's our show for tonight, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow again at 7 p.m. I'm Sean Akimale. God bless Nigeria.